And we are moving on to the semifinals of the fantasy playoffs. What is up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of the TFA podcast. This time I'm going to be hitting you with the Week 15 quarterback rankings. If you're not familiar with how this show is going to go, Kev has his rankings we're going to throw up on the screen. I'm going to look at the Fantasy Pros consensus rankings just to give a little bit of a balance between the two. Before we jump into it, if you have not yet heard, hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel if you want to be entered for your chance to win a signed, authentic Allen Robinson jersey. Super sick. So, Kev, we don't have a lot of time to waste, man. There's people out here trying to get to a ship next week, so we're just going to jump right into it. If you're not watching on the YouTube channel, Kev's rankings are loaded up onto the screen. I'm going to read them off, and then we're just going to jump into a couple of these guys that we want to talk about. For Week 15, Kev has them as such. Aaron Rodgers leads things off over Patrick Mahomes at 2, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray at 6, Russ Wilson, Ryan Tannehill, Ben Roethlisberger at 9, Tom Brady, Deshaun Watson, and then Drew Brees. Kev, I'm going to give you the floor first. Who is someone that you want to talk about in these in your top 12 rankings for Week 15?
Yeah, I want to talk about Big Ben, right? Yeah, there's a couple of these other guys that I could have touched on, but I know you're going to be talking about one of them, so I felt the need to pivot a little bit, and I'm going to talk about Big Ben. So positives for Big Ben, really, even though the offense as a whole hasn't looked fantastic, they did not look very good against Buffalo this past Sunday night. For fantasy purposes, it's great because they are throwing at a much higher rate this year than they have in the past. So far on the season, they're throwing 62% of the time compared to last year. It was like 56% of the time. Now, some of that's to be expected considering who they had at quarterback. But still, and then over the last 3 weeks, they have thrown at a rate of 73% over the last week, which is by far the most in the league. So they just have pretty much abandoned the run. They've kind of been like the Chiefs, because the Chiefs in a lot of ways have been the same way as of late. But this is a fantastic matchup, really, to kind of get back on track. The Bengals ranked 29th in pass DVOA and 18th in run DVOA. So if you're wanting to cure your blues of your offense, this is certainly the way to do it. The Bengals have just been terrible this year on the defensive side of the football. And this is a get-right spot for the Steelers offense this week. So I like Big Ben quite a bit. Guys like James Conner right now, I just don't think you can really trust them. They're just not, especially with the little bit of usage that he's getting, even though this is a fantastic matchup. And would it surprise me if the Steelers did something and they just went way balanced, it was more 50-50 split because of the matchup this week, kind of, get things figured out? No, but this is also just not a matchup they really need to do that with. And they've shown the willingness to throw the ball. So I like Big Ben quite a bit this week and his pass catcher. So we'll talk about a couple of them likely whenever we get to the wide receiver position. But who are you on this week?
Yeah, man, I'm glad to see that you have him where you do, and that is Justin Herbert, who is sitting at Fantasy Pros consensus QB 9 right now. You have him up at 5. That's kind of the spot that I would have him as well. And if we go back to the beginning of the season, there was just one game through Herbert's first 9 starts where he didn't have a QB1 finish, and I think that game was like QB 14, so he was like right on the fringe. But since week 12, he hasn't finished higher than QB 14. And frankly, his game logs just have not looked the same as they did at the beginning of the year. Like, they just do not look like the dude that we saw through those first 9 starts. I mean, I think against the Patriots, he had like a less than 50% completion percentage. I don't think he's hit 300 yards. He had the 2 scores this last week, but I think going up against the Raiders, they've given up the 10th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. Just fired their defensive coordinator. He played them already earlier this year. He put up over 300 yards and 2 scores against them. I just think this has bounce back spot kind of written all over it. And I think Herbert the pervert should be ranked higher than what he is at QB 9 on the consensus ranking. So I was happy to see that we're kind of in lockstep with that, and you having him up at 5. Someone I'm lower on that I see that you're a little bit lower on too. I just want to throw this out there quickly. I don't think that there is a streamer that I would necessarily really be running out to hit to play to pick up to play over him. But that is Ryan Tannehill, and not a lot of stats or anything to throw you guys, but with Tannehill, the thing that I'm most worried about going up against Detroit, we know that defense is absolutely dreadful, can't stop anybody. And now it's looking like they're not going to have Matt Stafford, and he's barely been able to keep them in games. So it's going to be reliant on, Chase Daniel. So I just think this is another one of those games that has Derrick Henry, 30 rush attempts, 200 plus yards, and multiple scores written all over it. So I'm a little bit lower on Tannehill this week, but I'm not entirely sure how many of these streaming options that we're about to get to, are guys that are a little lower on the totem pole in terms of the ranks that I'd be like really slamming the table to start him over this week.
So I kind of think the same thing. Like, he does have a really high ceiling. I initially had him inside the top 5, but then I kind of thought about it a little bit more. And there is the potential that this should just be another Derrick Henry week, like you mentioned. And so I think he is, I don't want to say he's a risky start, because this is, a matchup against Jacksonville that they could crush. And let's be honest, Tennessee's defense hasn't been very good. And a lot of this is going to really depend on what happens with Matthew Stafford this week. I know early reports is, he probably won't play. But, I mean, Matthew Stafford is one of the toughest players in all of football. Like, this dude plays through so many injuries. It's not even funny. And he does not have any broken ribs. He does have cartilage injury, but which a lot of people say is actually more painful than a broken rib. However, Dr. Chow was saying that there is a chance does really great work, and was talking about this and was saying that basically he could play through it. He'd have to wear like a flak jacket to cover it up, and he could end up playing through it, because technically the Lions are not out of the playoffs right now with the Cardinals. Essentially sitting there. I think they're 2 games back of the Cardinals, and the Cardinals don't have an easy schedule moving forward. They have the Eagles, who look to have new life, and then they have the 49ers and the Seahawks to close out the season. So, or no, the Rams. I think, it's the Rams they close out the season with. So it's not easy sledding for the Cardinals rest of the season, because there's still a chance the Cardinals could get knocked out of the playoffs. So the Vikings, Bears, and Lions are all somewhat still in it here. So we'll have to see what happens with Stafford. And I think that has a lot to do with it. If Stafford is out, then no. I think Ryan Tannehill would drop down the rankings a little bit because of that. So I think you just kind of have to watch and see what happens with Stafford this week, because, if Stafford is out, I think that just kind of makes it to where it's just kind of a game for them. So we'll see what happens here with that.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be something to monitor for sure. Let's go ahead and move things on to the QB2 rankings, and we'll talk about a couple of these guys that we are interested in who might be sitting a little bit further down the ranks. For your QB2s, kicking things off at QB13, Jared Goff, followed by Phillip Rivers, Jalen Hurts, Matt Stafford, Mitchell Trubisky, Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins, Teddy Bridgewater, Matt Ryan, Drew Lock, Baker Mayfield, Cam Newton. I know there's a couple of guys that you want to talk about. I'm just going to touch on Jalen Hurts real quick. He's somebody who currently he's actually only sitting at, I think it's like 14% ownership in ESPN League, so he's widely available if you do want to go this route. He didn't exactly have a super impressive passing, production and passing outing by any means this last week. He completed less than 60% of his passes, had fewer than 170 yards. He did have the one touchdown to Alshon fucking Jeffrey of all receivers, but the big thing here is he put up over 100 yards. I think it was like 106 rushing yards on the ground in his first full start. So that we always want to look for that Konami code, the guy who can, give you at least that floor with his rushing ability. And I'm just excited for this matchup in general, because Kyler looked to be a little bit more like himself last week. He was looking healthier. D-Hop rebounded. The Eagles are going to have to keep their foot on their gas in this matchup. And I just personally can't wait to see these two quarterbacks kind of battle things out. This game opened up at 47.5. It already moved up to 48.5 for the game total. I wouldn't be surprised to see this to hit 50 by the time Sunday rolls around. So, and like you mentioned, whenever you were going through some of your QB1s, that the Eagles just seem to have a little bit more life. That spark. Miles Sanders came out and said something about like the leadership and the spark that Hurts gives them. So
probably be the number one waiver ad this week as well. So my guys that I want to talk about real quick, I just kind of want to hit on a few of these guys, because some of these guys are likely going to be available in waiver, but also players that I think that have really good matchup. I was really close for putting Jared Goff as a QB1 this week. I know we didn't really talk about it at the QB2 or the QB1 spot, but I do have Drew Brees at QB12. It's another situation we're going to have to monitor. They said he's got to be 100% for them to play. They desperately need this win if they want to have any shot at home field advantage, especially with only one team getting that first round bye. Yeah. And so they're kind of on that fringe right now because they lost, and now they're tied with the Packers. And so they kind of have to continue to win. And there's no shot in hell, I think, that the Saints can beat the Chiefs with Taysom Hill. Like, Taysom Hill was exposed last week. We talked about it on the Sunday show that I felt like the Eagles could expose him. So regardless of that, I just wanted to mention that. So if Drew Brees is out, then Jared Goff would slide into my QB1 spot at 12 right there. So Jared Goff was really rather pedestrian in the last game that they played. He rushed for 170 yards, or excuse me, he threw for 137 yards and a touchdown. But the majority of the reason they didn't have to do a whole lot, he only threw the ball 25 times, was because Cam Akers went out and balled. And that's something we'll talk about on the running back spot. But Goff and the Rams right now on the season are sixth in pass attempts on the season, ninth in passing yards. However, his 18 touchdowns are only 17th in the league, and he's 33rd in air yards. So he basically continues to pepper the underneath and intermediate routes, which has been good for Cooper Kupp and good for Robert Woods. But, they just don't really do much of the deep game. However, they get to take on a Jets defense this week that is absolutely fucking awful. They are 32nd in pass DVOA, but 7th in rush DVOA, and they've allowed the third most passing yards on the season. They're in the top 5 in passing touchdowns allowed as well. So this defense could certainly be had. I like Goff a lot this week. So if you're an owner of Robert Woods or Cooper Kupp, you can feel pretty good about them as well. So I love Jared Goff this week. Phillip Rivers, don't have to go a lot here. They're playing Houston again. Houston's absolutely atrocious. The Texans are 25th in pass DVOA, 26th in rush DVOA. This defense is just absolutely terrible. We just saw Mitchell Trubisky torch this defense, last week, where they really kind of only had to play really the first half because they kind of really just destroyed them. Trubisky threw for 267 and 3 scores. So I like Phillip Rivers this week. Mr. Trubisky is another guy you could go with. They are playing the Vikings, but like I just mentioned, he threw for 267, 3 scores. He also rushed 4 times for 24 yards. The Vikings, who are 9th in pass DVOA, with 17th in rush DVOA. However, I think some of that is a little bit of smoke and mirrors because the Vikings have allowed the 4th most passing touchdowns on the season. They definitely could be had. And I'm going to be honest, this Bears offense looks significantly better with Mitchell Trubisky under center. So I do like Mitchell Trubisky. Mitchell Trubisky has thrown at least 2 touchdowns in 4 of his 6 starts this year and has 3 touchdowns in 2 of those as well. So I do like Mitchell Trubisky again this week as a guy you could go to as a streaming option. I will personally be playing him, but nobody cares about my fantasy team, and that's all I got to say about that.
Both Rivers and Trubisky are sitting at 25% ownership in ESPN leagues as well. So you do have some options if you don't feel comfortable, maybe starting somebody like you were touching on, like Big Ben, even though the matchup as well, if you kind of have the feeling that they're going to go a little more balanced, which, like you said, they really don't have to. But the point is, there are some options out there if you want to go hit the waiver wire and hit some streams for the week. So that is going to wrap things up, guys. Let us know who, if you have any QB questions, drop a comment on the YouTube channel. We'll be sure to get to those. Sunday morning, don't forget, we will be going live at 11 a.m. and then Wednesday night going live as well. So we will definitely be around to answer your questions. Good luck in week 15. Let's get to that ship.